Welcome back to the deep dive where, we really like to get into some fascinating research.
Absolutely.
And today's topic is no exception.
Yeah.
You've handed us a stack on Drosophila brains.
The fruit fly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fruit fly brains.
Fascinating stuff.
So we're talking about mapping their connectome.
Yes.
And that's basically like the brain's wiring diagram.
It is a wiring diagram for the brain.
And the research shows how these tiny brains control behavior and learning in ways that are,
It's remarkable, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
frankly, mind-blowing.
You would think of insects, I mean, you see them flying around, you swat them away,
Right.
but their brain is capable of complex computations.
Yeah. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a crash course on this connectome thing? It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It really does. It does.
Yeah.
But imagine, if you were, a three-dimensional map.
Okay.
But instead of streets and buildings, we have every single neuron and synapse in the brain.
Wow.
That's the connectome.
So it's like Google Maps, but for the brain.
Exactly. And by tracing these neural pathways, researchers can begin to, crack the code
Oh, well.
as to how the fly brain processes information
Okay.
and controls behavior.
So how do they actually map something so incredibly small and complex?
So it's a Herculean effort, I have to say that.
Yeah.
But what they do is they use these very high-resolution electron microscopes to image thin slices of the fly brain.
Okay.
And then they painstakingly piece together the images, tracing the path of each neuron and its connections.
Wow. That sounds incredibly tedious.
It is tedious, but the payoff is huge.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we're finding out is just how interconnected everything is.
Okay.
Over 90% of the neurons in a fly brain are part of one giant interconnected network.
Wow.
Information can zip around back and forth incredibly efficiently.
I mean, no wonder those little guys are so quick.
They need to be.
They need to be to dodge my fly swatter.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so if everything is so interconnected, how do we even begin to understand which circuits control which behaviors?
Well, that's where the real detective work comes in.
Okay.
Because now that we have this map, researchers are using this connectome data to pinpoint specific circuits
Okay.
involved in things like movement, learning, even decision-making.
So it's like having a circuit diagram for the brain.
Exactly.
Like you can see which wires connect to which parts, and then you can start to figure out like what each part does.
Yeah. So, for example, there's a fascinating study
Okay.
done by McKellar and colleagues
Okay.
where they identified a group of 6 neurons called BRK neurons
Okay.
that can literally stop a fly dead in its tracks.
Wait, hold up. 6 neurons can make a fly go from buzzing around to a complete standstill.
That's it. That's all it takes.
Wow.
Like finding an emergency brake for the fly brain.
Wow.
So we think these neurons might be involved in things like, escaping from predators,
Okay.
or maybe just deciding to take a break from all that flying around.
Oh, talk about a power nap. But seriously, finding a specific behavior controlled by such a small group of neurons is incredible.
It is.
Are there other examples like this?
Oh, absolutely. There's another great study
Okay.
by Garner and his team,
Okay.
and they focused on how flies use visual cues to navigate.
Okay.
And they were curious about a group of neurons called ER neurons.
Okay. I'm trying to picture this.
Yeah.
What do these ER neurons do?
Think of them as the fly's internal compass.
Oh.
So they receive visual input.
Okay.
And based on that input, it helps the fly figure out its heading.
So like a built-in GPS system.
Exactly, a built-in GPS system.
Wow.
And here's the really cool part.
Yeah.
Using the connectome,
Yeah.
Garner's team was able to predict which ER neurons would be activated by specific visual cues,
Wow.
like vertical stripes, for example.
Wait, so just by looking at the wiring diagram,
Yeah.
they could tell which neurons would light up when a fly saw a striped pattern.
Precisely.
Wow.
And to top it off, they actually tested their predictions in living flies and found that they were right.
Wow.
A perfect example of how we can use the connectome to make accurate predictions about brain function.
Okay, that is seriously cool.
It is.
It's like this connectome was like having a cheat sheet for the brain.
There is like a cheat.
You can see the connections, you can predict how they work, and then you can actually test those predictions.
That's right.
It's like a whole new level of understanding.
And we're just getting started.
Wow.
As we delve deeper into this fly connectome, who knows what other secrets we'll uncover about how these tiny brains control behavior.
My mind is already buzzing with possibilities. It's kind of wild to think about a fly's brain having like a GPS system,
I know.
I can barely navigate my own city.
Right.
But this is what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's like getting a backstage pass to the most mind-blowing science out there.
And speaking of mind-blowing, what's even more fascinating is how this research on flies, I mean, these tiny, seemingly insignificant creatures, can teach us about ourselves.
Wait, really? Are you telling me that understanding how a fly learns to navigate could lead to breakthroughs in, like, human brain research?
You got it.
Wow.
Yeah, because remember how we talked about the fly brain being like a simplified model?
Right.
Well, it turns out that flies and humans actually share a surprising number of genes,
Mm-hmm.
many of which are involved in things like learning, memory, even neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But can you give me a concrete example?
Sure.
How does studying flies actually translate to helping humans?
Take Alzheimer's disease, for example.
Okay.
It's a devastating condition that affects millions of people, and we still don't fully understand what causes it.
Right, and there's no cure either.
Right.
So how do flies fit into all of this?
Well, some of the genes that are implicated in Alzheimer's disease in humans have counterparts in flies.
Okay.
Researchers can actually manipulate these genes in flies, create models of the disease
Oh, wow.
that they can then use to test potential treatments.
So they're like tiny test subjects that can help us understand a disease that affects millions of people.
Exactly.
Right.
And because flies reproduce quickly and have a relatively short lifespan,
Right.
researchers can study the progression of the disease and the effects of different treatments much faster than they could in humans or even other animal models.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's not just about understanding how flies see or navigate. It's about using them as a tool to potentially unlock treatments for some of the most challenging diseases out there.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Really?
Fly research is also shedding light on Parkinson's disease, sleep disorders, even the effects of traumatic brain injury.
This is making me think about that whole butterfly effect thing.
Uh-huh.
Except here it's more like the fruit fly effect.
The fruit fly effect, I like it.
These tiny creatures are having a big impact on our understanding of the human brain.
Yeah, and to think all of this is made possible by mapping that fly connectome. It's given us this incredible tool to study the brain at a level of detail we never thought possible.
It's like having a roadmap to a whole new world of discovery.
It is.
But speaking of maps, we've been talking a lot about specific circuits and behaviors.
Yeah.
But can this connectome tell us anything about how the fly brain is organized overall?
It absolutely can.
Sure.
One of the most exciting areas of research right now is looking at the brain as a network.
Okay.
So think of it like social networks.
Okay.
But instead of people and their connections, it's neurons and synapses.
Okay, so we're talking about analyzing the brain's social network.
Exactly.
What kind of insights can we gain from that?
Well, for starters, we're learning that the brain isn't just this random jumble of connections.
Okay.
It has a very specific and organized structure.
Okay.
Researchers are finding that the brain is divided into modules.
Okay.
These are groups of neurons that are densely interconnected and seem to work together on specific tasks.
So kind of like specialized departments within a company?
A perfect analogy. You have your visual processing department, you've got your olfactory department, that's your sense of smell, your motor control department, and so on.
Wow.
What's even more interesting is these modules are connected in a hierarchical way, with information flowing from lower-level modules to higher-level modules.
So like a chain of command in the brain,
That's it.
with each level processing information and making decisions.
Exactly.
Well,
And this hierarchical modular organization, it's not unique to flies.
really?
It's found in many other animals, including humans.
So even though our brains are vastly more complex, there are still these fundamental principles of organization that we share with flies.
Precisely.
Wow.
That's what makes the fly brain such a powerful model system,
Okay.
because it allows us to study these fundamental principles in a relatively simpler system,
Okay.
which can then give us insight into the workings of more complex brains.
It's like learning the alphabet before you try to write a novel.
Exactly, and the connectome is giving us that alphabet of the brain.
It really is amazing to think about, how much we can learn from these tiny little creatures.
It is. It is.
And it makes me want to like take a peek inside my own head.
Right.
But this whole connectome thing is really glowing my mind,
Yeah.
Like we're getting a glimpse into the brain's blueprint, like for the very first time.
It's true, and we're just starting to scratch the surface of what this tool can do.
Really?
Yeah, remember that study we talked about, the one by Dorkenwald and their team?
Yeah.
They mapped the entire connectome of an adult fly.
Yeah. The one where they mapped, what was it, over 100,000 neurons?
100,000 neurons.
And millions of connections.
Zillions and millions.
That's just mind-boggling.
And that level of detail is really giving us insights that, we could only dream of before.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah.
they're finding that the fly brain, like many other complex networks,
Okay.
has something called small world properties.
Okay, now you've lost me. Small world properties.
That's it.
What in the world does that mean?
Think about this.
Okay.
You want to send a message to someone across the world.
Go.
You probably know someone who knows that person, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that's the idea behind small world networks.
Okay.
Even though there are tons of nodes, in this case neurons,
Yeah.
they're all connected by relatively short paths.
So it's like the 6 degrees of separation thing, but for the fly brain.
You got it.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of efficient communication is
Right.
probably crucial for the fly's, lightning fast reflexes.
Right, they need to be able to,
You need to process information quickly.
yeah, to navigate, find food.
Avoid being swatted.
Yeah, avoid becoming someone's lunch.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
But here's the thing.
Yeah,
With so many connections, how do they figure out which ones are the most important?
that's a great question, yeah.
So this is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
They found that the fly brain also has something called rich club organization.
Rich club. Are we talking about like fancy neurons sipping tiny cocktails now?
I love that image, yeah.
Okay.
Basically, a rich club is a small group of very well-connected neurons.
Okay.
Think of them as the influencers of the fly brain,
Okay.
the ones everybody wants to talk to.
Got it.
So they receive information from lots of different parts of the brain.
Okay.
They process it and then send out instructions.
So these rich club neurons are kind of like,
Yeah.
they're calling the shots.
They're the CEOs.
Oh.
They're the ones making the decisions.
So by mapping the connectome, we're not only seeing the connections, but we're identifying the key players, the decision makers.
And that's just the beginning.
Wow.
As we map more connectomes, not just of flies,
Right.
but of other animals as well,
Right.
We'll start to see how these network properties differ across species
Okay.
and how those differences might explain the incredible diversity of brains and behaviors we see in nature.
Okay, this is so exciting. It really is. But it also makes me realize just how much more there is to learn.
There's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, it's like we've just opened the door to like a whole new universe inside the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
And we're just starting to explore it.
The connectome is a powerful new tool,
Yeah.
but it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
We need to combine it with other techniques
Okay.
to really understand how these connections translate into behavior.
So like how do neurons communicate with each other?
Exactly.
How do they learn? How do they adapt?
How do they give rise to consciousness?
These are big questions.
The big questions.
And thanks to this fly brain research, it seems like we're finally getting closer to some answers.
We are.
I don't know about you, but my brain is officially full.
Mine too.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive
It's been my pleasure.
into the world of fly brains. Who knew those tiny creatures could be so fascinating?
They are remarkable little creatures.
They really are. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.